So next up, we are very happy to welcome in our midst Mr. Leo KREFT, who I kindly ask to the podium to present his lecture titled Realism from the Painting Studio to Paranoia. Mr. Leo KREFT is a sociologist and philosopher who works as a publicist and a lecturer. He was a professor of aesthetics at the Faculty of Arts, University of Ljubljana, where he taught in various departments, faculties, and academies. He also taught the philosophy of sport at the Faculty of Arts and Faculty of Sport, University of Ljubljana. Between 2004 and 2012, he was the director of the Peace Institute in Ljubljana and co-founder of the Slovenian Society for Aesthetics. Mr. Elklev, please.
Thank you. So, I would like to tell two stories. One about realism of Courbet from 1855, and another of surrealism of André Breton from 1929 to 30. And I will try to put both these events in context, understand the context as what is inhabiting the field of artwork, and its traces of this context can be found detecting in the work of art or in its broader context. So the first context, or the first story of Courbet, Courbet proposed 13 of his paintings for the Universal Exhibition, or International Exhibition, Expo, inserted the next one, for this, the first in history International Exhibition of Visual Arts. And 11 of these 13 were accepted, but not Goricia at Ornans and not the Painter's Studio. The reason we told was that they are too big to enter the space of the exhibition. So Courbet resignated from this World Exhibition International and decided to make exhibition of his own as his artistic and political statement and freedom, and even perhaps covering by selling tickets to those who wanted to enter. So that's the first part. And you see the entrance to the World Exhibition, and it is Courbet. His exhibition was called, as everybody knows, the Realisme de Courbet. And this is Goricia, or Ornans, which everybody knows as well. And second context, selling tickets, was taken from the first exhibition which had to be paid to watch. That's Sabine Women, of the intervention of Sabine Women by Jacques David. And Jacques David was very successful in that because people of Paris went to the exhibition as he spread around that he made the most beautiful women of Paris his models for this exhibition. Courbet was not that successful. It was unsuccessful financially, but he had his tutor who paid for all the Goricia, so it was not a big problem. And of those who went to the exhibition, there was also Eugène Delacroix, and he wrote in his diary afterward that Courbet is the painter of today and of the future, the great painter of the next generation. So let's go to the third context. The goal pursued by international exhibition, both international means that nation states are represented by their artistic representatives, and their artworks are to be exhibited as national culture specimens. So this was the aim of the exhibition, which was not present at the first Expo in London in 1851, was to prove that France is what England or Great Britain is not, a land of culture. Because English people, they have a lot of civilization in terms of industrialism and trade, but they are without any cultural independence and, let's say, power. So this starts with Comte Labeur, who visited London exhibition in 1851 and wrote a book about it. And he was at the beginning in charge of this 1855 Paris exhibition, but Napoleon took it away from him and put the exhibition in the hands of, he loved them, his philosopher, positivist philosopher and engineer, to put in front the idea of unending progress, where at the end all humanity will be as progressive as French people are, a thing like that. And that is why you find, by the way, in Baudelaire's criticism of Salons and especially of this expedition, his great, not just criticism, but a kind of terrific engagement against the idea of progress. He's a modernist, and we are surprised that he's against progress. He's against progress because progress is what positively brought to Napoleon III, to his plans what to do with Paris, like Osman and so on, but also to his international politics, like sending positivists to Mexico, to govern Mexico to become a civilized country, where we know that Maximilian died, was shot and so on. So that's the third content. It was a kind of ideology of imperial France under Napoleon III. Then the fourth context, Napoleon, who used the revolution in 1848 to come to power, and you will remember the longer title of the work painter's studio is also the last 7 years of my life. So if you took 7 from 55, you come to 1848, the revolution. A revolution at the beginning and symbolically at the end of his career. So when he took over this power, his problem as emperor was that he was not recognized by other kings and emperors of Europe. So to get recognition, he knew that he has to get Victoria and others to come to Paris to visit his universal exhibition and take a stroll together with him under Victoria and his hands. This is Laborde. This is Victoria at the exhibition in London. That was, by the way, the first occasion for people to see their queen. He was not there only at the opening of the World Exhibition of 1851. He was coming daily, more or less, when he was in London. That was not in Windsor or anywhere else in Scotland. So she was present all the time at this exhibition to support her husband, whom we love so much, as well known as photography. This is Napoleon III with Queen Victoria. That's what we wanted. This photography is what we wanted to achieve. We did, and it was really after this international exhibition accepted by the monarchs of Europe. Now, the fifth content. The fifth content is historical painting in crisis. In crisis, acknowledged by everybody of that time. So what to do about it? And that's very probably why Andrew got the most important prize, which was given by Napoleon III, of course, of this exhibition. Dominique Andrew was at that time already very old, but he was given this prize to, of course, inaugurate this neo-classicism of Napoleon III, I would say official state classicism, which wanted to show the greatness of the ruler, or the monarch, and also, of course, of the state and of the nation. So this is the kind of art which is really a predecessor of social realism and not revolution. And historical painting for Baudelaire was something which had to be put to the past, to live in the past, and we know historical painting no more. But Maxime Duchamp, one of the same modernist circle, he wrote about new kind of historical painting, industrial buildings, post offices, railway stations especially, and of course everything else which is connected with progress we will there in life. But there were also other proposals one of them was also connected with this international exhibition where Barbiton School was well represented, that also landscape painting could be the new kind of the highest genre of painting instead of this historical painting. I'm mentioning that because Courbet, as well known in his career, especially after 1865, was doing landscape painting and he was selling it very well. Now we can go to the painter's studio. Let's see it on. This is a painting I don't pretend to interpret it correctly. Nobody knows what is the correct interpretation. There's a fine thing going on, so on. But we know that in the middle is the art. The artist himself, with muse, let's say, little naive boy, and a dog. So that's cats. That's the center of the painting. That is what happens. That is allegory to the painting. On the other side are friends like Baudelaire, like also Briat, sitting there praying for it. And on the other side, all the interpretation was that these are rulers of Europe, because this man is so similar to Napoleon III, but nowadays interpretations say this is going to the everyday life of French people, which are the big here. So I think this second is more near to what we see. But anyway, here we have everything presented. It's called allegory, real allegory, it's called allegory rare, summing up 7 years of my artistic and moral life. So it's a kind of balance and balancing, kind of saying what happened in these 7 years, what happened, what I became, and what my painting has become in between, the new, and what is realistic about it is this everyday life of everyday people, and of course also landscape, which would be paints. But it's saying in this allegory that art can show the world as it is, which we otherwise do not see. Realism is something in art which gives us the ability to see what otherwise we may not see. It's all there in control of the painter. So Courbet's realism is modernism with political position, not party political position. Here is, of course, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, whom he took as his own ideologue. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon could know that all property is theft, is revolt, is illegal, and this Courbet idea, subversive idea, is what kept Courbet all of his time. You know very well that he was part of the Paris Commune revolution of 1871, that he was punished by 6 months because of his involvement or non-involvement with now was painting of his Swiss times of Vendôme column, which was put down, and which was a symbol of Napoleon I and his victory in Auschwitz. And this was not the highest punishment, this 6 months of jail. He was taken away of all rights of a member of the academy, which means he couldn't anymore bring his works to the salon. And also, if he sold any of his paintings, all money was taken by the state. So he couldn't survive in France, but he went to Switzerland, where he painted this Swiss landscapes, let's say, and could earn something with them, believing that, as in case of French Revolution, after French Revolution, the spell, the evidence, the other countries would come back Russian artists very soon. You remember that David was invited, he didn't want to go, that is not my country anymore. I didn't want to be any monarch, but the others went back. But this time there was no invitation, so it would be died in exile. So let's go to the second story. We'll see, it would be in Switzerland. So let's go to surrealism. The second story, the context of surrealism on the threshold between the 20s and the 30s is of course in 1921, a crash of the United States stock exchange, and the Great Depression, which exploded but did not diminish after 1939, when the Second World War took over. Authoritarian regimes were the most popular political outcome of crisis, an outcome especially popular for capitalism. And in Italy, Soviet Union, Japan and Germany developed totalitarian states in which the war and violence were just politics using its natural means. The revolutionary uprisings from the end of the First World War were long over, even if resilient communities and left-wing parties everywhere still fought between themselves who to cover. From hatred between communists and social democrats as the most favorite battleground, followed by Soviet processes against Bolshevik revolutionary leaders, culminating in process against Bukhari from 1947 to 1938, executed in March 1938. Spanish Civil War involved just enough of the international left to prove once more that they preferred fighting between themselves to fighting against extreme right movements. So-called civilized world of Europe and the West once more testified that humanism, enlightenment, republican democracy, fair play and equal opportunities were just illusions in a moment, hiding the brutal and bloody war very moment control us. So surrealism confronted with such circumstances could not remain satisfied with psychoanalysis as the only creative approach which could attack and destroy bourgeois, academism and all the other established fakes and lies. It was too subjective, too passive. Therefore, historical materialism was introduced to cover for expression of conflicting world in a dialectic manner. This, as usual, was announced by a manifesto of Plato. The first sentence of 1929 manifesto of surrealism, written as usual mostly by him, puts historical materialism in contact with psychoanalysis already engaged before. And that is an important text. So, this is this text, which you can read, or I can read, or both. So, I think that the most important part I want to stress is, how can one accept, right, the fact that the dialectical method can only be validly applied to the solution of social problems? But he's again the idea that historical materialism and dialectics are useful only for studying social problems. There are many other things which has to be studied through dialectics and historical materialism. The entire aim, I continue, of surrealism is to supply it with practical possibilities in no way competitive in the most immediate realm of conservative consciousness, the most immediate realm of consciousness. I really fail to see, some narrow-minded revolutionists notwithstanding, why we should refrain from supporting the revolution, provided we view the problems of love, dreams, madness, art, and religion from the same angle they do. So see it from the angle of historical materials. That, I think, is the most important part of it, and of course, one of the main goals. One of the reasons to involve historical materialism was also the automatism, opening flow of unconscious seemed for this new context too passive means, too passive tool. How to make surrealism an active and politically involved movement and communal power? Well, that answer was given in Paris at the Hospital of Saint-Anne. It is also, by the way, that in this texts, in these manifestos over the dawn of the beginning of the service, he also quotes all the time Trotsky's text. Trotsky was still, you know, at that time, not very loved or even high political person in Russia, but obviously he was already chosen by surrealists to be their man. So here is another quote which can support, from the surrealist point of view, what wrote Breton. And this text is of Karl Teige, but from 1924, from 6 years before. Teige included 1934, of course, later, and Teige included the fair of art with the sentence, "The desire to liberate song, dreams, imagination, and love must also be involved in the reconstruction of history." So you see the connection. He was directly taking the idea from the manifesto, telling it in his own words. But much later, 1978, Herbert Marcuse repeated in a way, "All reification is forgetting." This is a quote from the Electrics of Enlightenment by Horkheimer. "Art fights reification by making the petrified world speak, sing, perhaps dance. Forgetting past suffering and past joy alleviates life under an impressive reality principle. In contrast, remembrance spurs the drive for the concepts of suffering and the permanence of joy." So this is what surrealism was, historical materialism. In the hospital of Saint-Anne in Paris, I was there, at that time, and the 20th, beginning of the 30s, where, as later too, even after the Second World War, when Lacan himself had lectures at this hospital, it was hospital, psychiatric hospital. At that time, there were lectures on phenomena. And these lectures were attended together by Jacques Lacan and by surrealists, and together with French surrealists, also Marc Boris-Vich and Roger Borch. So, and as those who are studying this part of history of avant-garde of surrealism know, Popovich after that decided to get some more and better information about historical materialism and went not to Soviet Union, not to artists of Marx text under tutorship of social democratic parties and so on. He went to Frankfurt School. It was the beginning of the 30s, the time when already the victorious march of Nazism was very well felt in Frankfurt mind as well. So when he went back to Belgrade, he had an idea of what was going on in the world. And at that time, together with Mark Boris-Vich, they published in Belgrade in 1931 the blueprint for a phenomenology of the irrational. So here is the key point. I will read. Speaking of the law of opposites of polar unity, August Horkheimer emphasizing that this law is all the more difficult to perceive because the concepts in question are more abstract. This is directly, from Frankfurt School taken explanation of unity of opposites, something ununderstandable in normal positivist way. It's unpositivist philosophy, this dialectic philosophy from Hegel, Marx to Frankfurt School. Because the concepts in question are more abstract. That, for example, existence, non-existence, rational, irrational, seem inconceivable antinomies to dialectically untrained thought. If, however, even these concepts, the equalization of which is inconceivable to non-dialectical thought, can be dialectically synthesized, one of the prospects of dialectics might be the so-called paranoia, which by its violent action equates without departing from their material basis, from their objectivity, Objects whose external and logical opposition cannot even be noticed. Paranoia is a peculiar constitution and mechanism of the spirit, a peculiar faculty of thought, takes external objects for the realization of intrusive ideas, its predominant desires. The polarized current of paranoid reasoning consists in the fact that paranoid thought in relation to objects of external world, as opposed to the distortion or dematerialization to which these objects are subjected in its own way by idealistic philosophy, whether expressionist or impressive or expressionist art, makes any object out of any object without distortion and without dematerialization. This it sees in every object a multitude of objects. It depends only on the level of paranoid ability. I'll just mention in between that if we read it, we could also say this is not just from Einstein relativism, which is relativity, which is visible in this book by Ristich and Popovich, is also very needed to understanding the reality as quantum reality and not firm positivist reality. So when Lacan at that time we get in contact with surrealists, went to study what surrealists think about paranoia. He was at Venice place many times, and he also met with Breton. So in his PhD, Lacan also, I would say, engaged surrealist ideas and even tried to write some surrealist poems at that time. Paranoia then is one of the prospects of dialectics, and its advantage is in grasping reality without distortion and dematerialization, together with the ability to perceive multitude of objects, just making any object out of any object. This approach is repeated when primitive thought, so important for avant-garde, especially surrealism, is introduced into discourse on presentation of reality. And here, fetishism joins paranoia. Paranoia and finalizing, magic, fetishism, they all have reality in active and not contemplative attitude, together with their mysterious uniqueness, which does not allow deductive abstraction, but promotes irrational concreteness. This is historically materialist paranoia united with magic fetishism, a surrealist reality in action. So, when totalitarianism writes again, paranoia worldview is a realist worldview. And that was why I wanted to tell you these stories. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Mr. KREFT? No? Oh, yeah, we do.
Question again. I'm sorry. Thank you very much for this lecture. It was really interesting. And you're finalizing with a really good thought. Can we expand a little bit on it and reflect on the situation today and how it can, how we can find maybe some parallels or opposites from the time that you were talking about now?
Well, of course, I wouldn't go into concreteness of today's politics, starting to speak about Trump on a serious occasion. But we are all becoming paranoiacs, and we see that. And that was the fact I wanted to catch, and to say that realism in art was always capable to deal with this kind of understanding of your own world, which is not realistic in terms of positivism. That's what I wanted to say. That's why I wanted to say also that socialist realism, which is also part of Neue Sachlichkeit in this or that way, is connecting historically with Napoleon III's academism and not with Courbet realism, which they claimed, of course, the authors, even Lukács and so on, that it does. It does not. Courbet is connected with surrealism much better than with socialist realism in this same movement of new realism or Neue Sachlichkeit and so on. So I would say that today's art is showing a lot of moments, more and more, starting to get to activate itself. having a lot of trouble with getting away from politics, not entering the politics, because it's dangerous, you know, and you lose perspective of paranoia when you enter this or that party and movement. But on the other side, of course, to be active. And for Courbet to be active was to paint. And for surrealists to be active was to do paranoia as their own artistic, as an artistic approach, artistic tool, and not to put it together with yes, dialectics, historical materialism, and so on, but not a tool for going into demonstrations, running around, selling newspapers like Sartre did, and so on, with Trotskyist newspapers and so on. It's okay if you want to do it, but it has nothing to do with what art has to do in such times. So what art has to do in such times is to make invisible visible, to make invisible what is really going on. That's the realism, right? I think that that's the fact I would mention, and not going into this movement. I have nothing against this political engagement, but it's political engagement, not artistic engagement, even if it uses language of art. For surrealists, as for Courbet, you use the language of art if you want to have realism. That's my point, even for contemporary art.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a maybe very broad question, but why do you think that there's like I mean, realism was always there in some form, technically, but why do you think that it's actually bursted out after the World War I? What is your opinion? What is the reason that suddenly, in a relatively modern world, the realism is coming back in this form that we saw?
Well, of course, there are many reasons, I would say, because reality, you know, was something which happened after the First World War. Was a kind of reality best shown in another kind of approach to visual arts. And this situation of capitalism in trouble and going on with all this authoritarian and totalitarian movement was another occasion. And this occasion, of course, it was, I would say, subversive to show the life as it is. Like we saw a lot of images these 2 days. I'm sorry I couldn't be here yesterday because I had my lectures, but I know that you've seen a lot of pictures here today as well. And these pictures show you just show what the really is, the life, how it looks, and it is subversive. But there are other situations which are different. What is important about realism, what is coming back all the time, because on one side you have realism, which is ideological power over art to control what art shows as reality. That's Napoleon III, that's Stalin, and so on, and Gesamtkunstwerk, Stalin, and so on. And the other realism is subversive, showing what really goes on. And sometimes to show what really goes on is enough to show the photographies of people jumping from stock exchange buildings because of the fall of the whole system of capitalism in the States. But another time it needs something more than that. And this something more is something I try to show, that Courbet tries to show us the power of art in the artist studio. And I wanted to show you how paranoia was useful when, well, nobody sane would think that paranoia is something which discovers what's going on really in the world. But what they wanted to say is that paranoia shows you that your paranoia is real. It's not because you're not insane. If you are paranoia, you're very sane. You're the only sane people here around. So that's what I can say about realism in that context.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?